Hi everybody, I'm Zilla and welcome to episode 5, our penultimate episode in our series with Save South Vietnam. The fortress game solitaire war game where you control the US and South Vietnamese forces over the span of the entire Vietnam War. Now we've survived the initial onslaught of Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces. We've survived the Tet Offensive. We've survived the Easter Offensive. But there's still 4.5 years of the conflict left to go. And our fledgling South Vietnamese army is struggling to hold on to its provinces in the northern part of the country. Adding more challenge to that, in 2 years' time, we have perhaps what's going to be our greatest challenge of the conflict, the Spring Offensive of 1975. Basically, the entire North Vietnamese army is going to be hurled at us in one final offensive. So we have a lot of work to do. We have to see if we can hold on in the northern part of South Vietnam. We have to continue to build up our South Vietnamese army, and we have to see if somehow we can get ourselves ready for this massive final offensive. All right, as we get started in 1973, let's do a quick recap of our current situation. Simply put, in very simple terms, the south part of the country here to our left on the screen is relatively stable. Central part a little shaky, but doing okay, and the north is a total mess. Let's go take a look at each region in turn. Southern South Vietnam is doing pretty good. We have a little bit of political influence, insurgents down here, but nothing that our police forces, which we can't see, they're not represented on the map here, but in those political boxes. But the police forces are strong in Mekong, Saigon, and then here in Bien Hoa. And so we're handling everything down here, and this is good for us. It's building South Vietnamese Army brigades. Everything is really good. Central part of South Vietnam, this is a problem. Strong military presence, but I think we have the forces nearby to be able to take these when they come down. I'd like to be able to see if we can clean up this North Vietnamese Army Brigade up here in the outlands near Cam Ranh. And then down here in Quang Ngai, we're doing okay. We've got one unit I'd like to take out, a little bit of political action. We have to kind of worry about that. So problems, but not something relatively calm compared to what we're going to look at now, which is in the north. Note to future self, however, we had an opportunity in the last couple of seasons to build a very fledgling police force in Quang Ngai, and instead I opted to reinforce the police force here in Quy Nhon. I should have built a police force in Quang Ngai because that would have allowed us to recover South Vietnamese Army brigades in this province. That was a tactical mistake. For future self, I want to try to build police forces as far north as we can so that when the South Vietnamese Army is on their own, they don't have to march all the way back down here, which we have to do now. Oh dear, the northern part of South Vietnam. What do we do with you? Here, for historical reference, is our last U.S. unit. It's a squadron of helicopters, completely banged up here, but they will be leaving, so they are not going to provide any help for us now. We have a hotbed of Viet Cong insurgency in Da Nang, as well as potential North Vietnamese Army Brigade to drop down into Da Nang to make our life even worse. I want to focus on this. As hard as it might be to hold Da Nang, I want to see if we can take this brigade out before it drops down and see if we can keep this insurgency, just keep knocking this insurgency down, because I don't want to lose Da Nang. Hue, this is different than it looked like at the end of the last episode because of the mistake I made. Basically, we had a South Vietnamese Army Brigade here that I brought down to the base in Da Nang and recovered, and then brought back up here. But I couldn't do that. I can't recover a South Vietnamese Army Brigade in Da Nang because it doesn't have a police force. So I fixed that. I marched that unit down to Quy Nhon with its turns, and that means that instead of this having no Viet Cong forces, it now has one. In the meantime, I took these green units are special. They have a special ability. They're the airborne and then the Marines, South Vietnamese Army. These are an optional rule where you actually give the North Vietnamese forces a little bit of advantages in other places. But this means these units can move freely any place once. On one turn, you can move one or both of them freely to any other province on the map, which is good. And additionally, they can fly back to the Mekong region or Saigon once per year either, not once per turn, once per year. So I took our other unit that was up here and flew it back. It will show back up in Hue shortly, which will be helpful to us. So Hue, we need to try to keep it down here. Likewise, Quang Tri, all these North Vietnamese Army brigades, they're going to drop down. We don't have much up here. So this is kind of a problematic. I think at some point we might have to sacrifice one province, and I think we can handle the situation if we lose one province. I want it to be Quang Tri, and I want to hold on to Da Nang. So that, if we need to, I'm going to sacrifice this one, and hopefully we can concentrate on keeping Da Nang. So that's our rough idea as we go into 1973 here. So now we'll move forward about 6 months and take a look at how things look. I do want to remind us what we're heading towards in the beginning of 1975, so exactly 2 years from now, we're going to get the Spring Offensive. And the Spring Offensive is basically pretty much every North Vietnamese Army brigade in the whole world is going to come hitting South Vietnam. So we have to continue building up our South Vietnamese Army. That's going to be their last real big offensive to try to overtake the country here. So we're getting ready for that. That's kind of the ultimate battle at the end of this conflict. But let's see how we do over the next few months, and I'll be back to take a look at it in the summertime here of 1973. July 1973, I feel like the northern part of South Vietnam is kind of like the South Vietnam Alamo. We're just like constantly overwhelmed and scrambling to kind of put forces just where we can hang on. So far, we've barely hung on to all our provinces up there. Let's take a look at the country and see how we're doing all together. Southern part of South Vietnam, stable as she goes. We have yet been able to reduce any of these political cadres. We've not had a good role there. However, we did produce 5 South Vietnamese Army brigades over the course of these 6 months. 4 brigades, which has been really helpful. So we're getting reinforcements slowly but surely. However, if we take a look at the central part of South Vietnam, we were able to contain a lot of these units drop down. There's been heavy fighting here in Quy Nhon, but we've been able to just bring in enough forces as our new South Vietnamese Army brigades and kind of ones that have been trickling down from the southern part of the country come in. They've been fighting here. We've been able to hold our own here. We've just had a North Vietnamese Army brigade drop down here in the Cam Ranh area, so we're going to have to take care of that. We've got some forces here. They're not at full strength, but we're just sending them off into battle, just trying to meet frantically to hold off these attacks where we can. The problem is, as we can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. We took out this North Vietnamese Army brigade that was up here in the remote areas, but we've got these units are trickling back from the north as they're beat up because they have to get all the way down here to Quy Nhon in order to be able to replenish, and we can only replenish 1 strength point per turn, which means we're kind of getting hit harder than we can replenish the troops. This is a long-term problem, so the prognosis for the northern part of Vietnam isn't good because these guys are going to have to come down, and basically I'm just trying to scatter these guys out all over the southern part of the country to replenish them as fast as I can. But we're getting hit pretty hard in the north, as we shall see. But so far, central area relatively stable. We're just kind of fighting off this insurgency here. We've cleared out some troops up here, so we have been able to take some offensive actions against those North Vietnamese Army brigades, which has helped. But still, it's a frantic defense here. And then we come to the northern part of the country. We have been able to hold on here in Da Nang, barely. But we were able to send a contingent of South Vietnamese forces up here into the remote area, take out that North Vietnamese Army brigade before it could drop down. Pretty much every turn, Da Nang generates this kind of 1 strength point versus 1 strength point of Viet Cong forces. We can bring in 2 strength points of South Vietnamese forces, which means if we don't roll a 1, we can knock it out. But here we can see this unit, in addition, has been depleted all the way down. It's going to have to march all the way back to the central part of the country to replenish itself too. Here in Hue, we've held on, but we have another battle coming up here. This unit is probably going to get depleted in this round. I think a 1 or a 2 he won't, but that could go. Here, we've been able to barely hang on in Quang Tri, but our specialist forces, airborne and the Marines now, are almost at the point of complete depletion. This airborne unit will be able to probably, unless it rolls a 1, we'll be able to take out this unit here. But what happens when these drop down and this one's going to get hit? So we're going to have both of these depleted, which means we're going to use their air movement, send them back to Mekong and Saigon, and then rebuild them to full strength and fly them back at full strength early in next year. But we're going to lose them for the rest of this year pretty quickly. So I don't know how much longer we can hold on to both of these provinces in the north. But yeah, we're going to keep going and try to fight the good fight. My philosophy at this point is to not give an inch until we absolutely have to just tenaciously hang on in each one of these provinces until we absolutely have to say, we're done, we have to pull back. And hopefully we don't lose both of them at the same time. I don't feel like I'm compromising one province by trying to defend both yet at this point in time, but that may come. It might be like, okay, we're going to lose both provinces if we try to defend both provinces. But that hasn't happened yet, so we're trying to fight the good fight. We'll see you in 6 months. December 1973, our situation in the north continues to deteriorate. Let's take a look at each area as we get ready to replenish the North Vietnamese Army brigades and their political cadres as well. Southern part of South Vietnam is as happy as can be, and I mentioned that we have to get really lucky. Like if there's one political cadre, we have to roll snake eyes. If there's two, there were two here, we have to roll a 2 or a 3. I've been rolling for each province for each season. That's 9 times 4, 36 rolls. Nothing until the very last season when we rolled snake eyes up here for the Mekong region to eliminate the political cadre there, and then rolled a 3 in Bien Ha to eliminate the political cadre there. However, I would have loved to have those rolls up in the northern part of the country where the real problems lie. I mean, I'm grateful they happened, but we only had 2, and they were probably in the least beneficial places to have them happen. However, the South looks good. We've brought back our airborne and our South Vietnamese Marines. We flew them out of the hotbed in the north to get them recovering down here so we can fly them back at the beginning of next year. Central part of the country, neither of these units decided to move down into the populous areas, and we did not have the strength or the forces to be able to get up there and attack them. Basically, all I'm trying to do is to bring our South Vietnamese, our kind of battered South Vietnamese brigades that kind of come back down here into the central part, to move them out and spread them around the south part of the country, replenish them as quickly as I can, and then slide them, basically trying to get them as far north as they can before they get hammered and get wiped out and need to march all the way back down to the central part of the country or the southern part of the country to replenish themselves. So it's kind of, it's really inefficient. We're taking more losses than we can replenish, and the losses are faster than we can build units at this point too. So I don't know. I feel like the tipping point's working against us, but let's take a look at the north. In the north, Quang Tri we've completely abandoned our presence there. Our airborne brigade had a really unfortunate military engagement with this unit. It did not succeed. It was depleted. We just had no forces up here to replenish it. Now Quang Tri is generating its insurgency. It's only going to get stronger. Now it's going to take a while for this to get strong enough to fall, but I think we're giving up on Quang Tri. We might be able, if we can get some forces and we can bring back our special forces, that airborne and that marine, we might have a chance to knock this back down or perhaps retake it or at least get a presence here. But I'm not confident because I think we're going to still need our forces here. In Hue, we're hanging on. Well as Da Nang, we're hanging on. It's just kind of, can we not roll a 1 basically? And then can we get any kind of military presence up here with whatever we can patch together? Literally, I'm just getting units down to the central part. As soon as they can fight at all, we're just sending them back up and seeing how far up they can make it. But so far, I mean, a province hasn't fallen yet. Quang Tri's on its way, though. We've lost our presence here. But now comes the big part. Let's bring in the political cadres, the new round of political cadres, which should be moderate, but we really don't have much room to sustain much more. And given that we haven't had any luck in removing them over the course of the year with combat, except for those 2 relatively useless ones, I'm a little bit worried that we're going to have more pressure on the provinces from the political cadres, and we get a relatively moderate. We had the Paris Peace Accord, which was in 1973, so there's relatively small numbers of North Vietnamese Army brigades that are coming in until next year when we get that spring offensive. So let's bring them in and see what the country looks like after that. January 1974, the fates did not shine on us as starting out here. We had a very high number of political cadres, despite the fact that it was supposed to get the highest possible number there. We had a moderate number of North Vietnamese Army brigades, but the places where the cadres landed was pretty devastating. Let's take a look at how things look as we head into, and not only that, only one of our special forces missions. We have basically 3 chances each year to knock out a political cadre. Only one of them succeeded. So we are in tough straits here. Let's take a look and see how things look. Southern South Vietnam, more political insurgency in Saigon, and they are back in Mekong. We can handle them, but I'm a little bit worried. I'll talk a little bit about why I'm worried about Saigon coming up here. So, I mean, we can bear this, but it's not as peaceful and happy as it was a few months ago. Central part of South Vietnam, as we can see here in Quang Nai, this is a problem. We now have 4 political cadres. We have to be on top of this, and if this drops down, If this North Vietnamese Army Brigade here attacks before we can take it out, we could quickly lose this province. So because we just don't have the strength really to have handle so many things. We have 3 North Vietnamese Army Brigades here. I mean, we can handle them unless they drop down in force, but if they come down at the same time, it's going to be hard to kind of hold off here in both of these places. Likewise, we have 1 pesky North Vietnamese Army Brigade that has appeared in Cam Ranh, and yeah, otherwise, I mean, we're okay here, but it's putting pressure on us that we don't need, right? And now let's take a look at the north. We had 2 more North Vietnamese Army Brigades appear in Quang Tri. 2 political cadres appear in Quang Tri, which means that this is going to fall. We can't save it, I don't think. And it's maybe if we brought our special forces here, we might be able to. I don't know. It's something to think about. It would be risky and probably cause us to lose everything. So I think we're going to have to give this up. And that means that these forces, one at a time, and these political cadres are all going to shift to Saigon, which is, Saigon can handle it, but it's kind of problematic, obviously. But yeah, Quang Tri's a total mess. Hue stayed exactly the same, so grateful for that. However, in Da Nang, we actually had a 5th one. This is where our Special Forces mission was successful. So still kind of seething here with political cadre action and a North Vietnamese Army Brigade up here. The problem is we just don't have the strength to be able to handle, I don't think we have the strength to be able to handle Hue, Da Nang, and Quang Nai, these 3 provinces right here. If these drop down in an untimely fashion, or if this one does, we could easily get overwhelmed here is the problem. But let's fight forward, and not to forget, in exactly 1 year's time, we're going to have a massive influx of North Vietnamese Army Brigades. So let's play this forward, but it's looking a bit grim here, especially with the North, but let's give it our best shot. Summer of 1974, Quang Tri is on the precipice of falling. It will fall in the next season for sure. Let's take a look and see how things are going. Southern South Vietnam, we actually had good luck this time. For the first time in a while, removing political cadres, eliminating political cadres. We knocked out 4. We rolled 2 snake eyes and 2 threes. So we got 1 out of Saigon and then a couple others out of other places. So stealth is still stable. However, once Quang Tri falls, we're going to see political cadres and North Vietnamese Army Brigades infiltrate right into Saigon's populous area. So I want to make sure that we leave military units here, because we're going to have to fight a kind of sustained battle in the Saigon area once Quang Tri falls. And I also want to make sure that we keep this police force strong so that it can sustain all the political cadres that are going to come in. So Saigon has to prepare for its first combat in several years now. The middle part, so we're going to have 6 months to prepare for the spring offensive coming up next year. The middle part of the country, we've been able to hold here pretty well, and actually our special operations was able to take out one of the political cadres here. I think our goal is going to be to try to take out this brigade and this brigade before the spring offensive, just to see if we can remove some pressure coming up there. I'm not sure if that makes sense, because I think we're going to get all the political brigades. So if we take them, right now we're probably going, yeah, you know, actually I'm thinking about this as I'm going on the fly, but I might actually leave them there, because we're going to get overwhelmed with North Vietnamese Army Brigades anyway, and once the stock of them is depleted, we get no more. So maybe it makes no sense to take them out, because we're just going to get them right back in the winter. So we might actually leave them there, thinking about it. I'll think about that as we go forward. But we've hung on here. Losing this political cadre has actually helped a little bit in Quang Nai. We've been able to hold on there a little bit, and kind of, it's not too far away from where we can replenish troops. So I feel like we can reach there. One of the things I would love, if we could just get 1 more political cadre eliminated here, then we could bring in 9 brigades, offset these political cadres, and get a fledgling police force started in Quang Nai, and that would be huge, because then we could replenish and recover our units here, and that would change the landscape of the combat in Da Nang and Hue. But with right now we would need 11 units in the populous area to offset these cadres. We just don't have that capacity, anything close to it right now. But if we could get 9, it's possible, which would be huge to have a police force in Quang Nai. I'm kicking myself that about 2-3 years ago we didn't do that. That was a key mistake. It seemed so little at the time and an insignificant decision, but it's huge because right now we can most replenish 5 units in any one season. If we had this at 6, it's a whole, it would change the landscape of the combat here. I'm kicking myself for not doing that. The ugly North. Our special forces flew in. Our Marines and Airborne flew in, and well, I guess the Marines probably came in by sea, and were able to just barely hang on to Hue here. Quang Tri is now at -8 on it. Oh, -9. Yeah, I replenished this. -8 on its political scale, but it's going to go to -10 with North Vietnamese forces in here and no friendly forces here. That means in the next season it will fall, and we're going to start to see combat in Saigon again. So Quang Tri is gone. Da Nang, we did have this unit perilously fall down. We brought in a pretty big force there. We actually fought really well. We got we fought well in Da Nang, and we're able to take out that Viet Cong unit and the North Vietnamese Army Brigade. So we're still hanging on in Da Nang. I would love if we could get rid of a couple of these cadres here, at least one of them, it would help so much, relieve some of the pressure there. Let's fight the last 6 months before the spring offensive and see what the country looks like, especially as we see Quang Tri fall and forces in combat start to reemerge in Saigon. December 1974, here it comes. Let's take a look at the situation, then we're going to bring in all of the troops for the spring offensive. We've got a lot to talk about. Let's go through things. Southern South Vietnam, we pulled back our special forces here to Saigon and Mekong to replenish them, send them back up north, possibly in the next year. Depends a little bit what happens here with this offensive. Otherwise, pretty stable. I was preparing for insurgents of North Vietnamese forces in Saigon, but we had a little bit of good fortune up in Quang Tri, so we'll talk about that when we get there. I decided after all just to leave these North Vietnamese Army brigades up here and not be aggressive and go after them, these individual ones that were up here. This one just attacked Quang Nai this past season. It's just moved down, so we'll have to deal with that one next. But the reasoning was that in this spring offensive, we're very likely, we're more than likely going to get all of the brigades left in the pool. And so by knocking them out, we would have just brought them right back in. So it didn't make sense to go after them. We'll just take advantage of the fact that we're going to get everything, and so why burn up troops unless it was absolutely necessary? And fortunately, especially these 3 brigades up here, they've been hanging out here, I think, for like 2 years, and they're just up in the woods, camping, not really doing anything. They just haven't descended at all. I mean, to descend, they need a 7 or greater, and we've rolled higher, I think, for like 8 consecutive seasons. So these brigades are just like, yeah, no, we're good. We're okay. Attack. Yeah, Quy Nhon, nah, we're fine. We'll just hang up here. So thank you guys for just being so chill and peaceful in the remote areas of this province. And if you could stay there for the rest of the war, we'd be perfectly happy. So just 2.5 more years, guys. Thanks. Down here, this brigade just did drop down. We've been able to, we did not, I was hoping we could reduce one here so we could get a police force in here, perhaps. That didn't happen, and now we have this little fight to take care of. So we're going to have to divert some forces here to Quang Nai to hold that off in the next round here. The North. Da Nang, we're holding on. We're actually been able to bring enough forces up to kind of, if we bring two brigades up here, we can be guaranteed to take this out, and we lose a point. It's kind of, this is our stabilized point here where they're always going to build one up, and we're always going to be able to take it out. We just have to make sure we get enough forces here. Likewise, it's really the same situation in Hue. I pulled our special forces out of here. This is where I brought them in. I pulled our special forces out of here, and unfortunately this unit, the brigade that was just here, fought poorly. So now we have a little bit more of a tricky situation, but I think we can bring our special forces in here in the next season to take care of these and maybe divert one. I think we got enough right now to handle this for the moment. We were fortunate. Quang Tri, we took out a political cadre, which meant that it delayed the fall of Quang Tri by 6 months. So instead of falling in the season after we did our last update, it's going to fall next season, unless we get super fortunate, because right now it has 10. Unless we get super fortunate in the combat phase, we can remove one more of these political cadres, which is highly unlikely. We need a 2 or 3 to do that. So it's more than likely going to fall in the next season. But we did buy ourselves another half year of time by getting lucky there and taking out one more political cadre. And that's our summary. Now it is the moment of truth. We're going to bring in another batch of political cadres, see how that impacts the country. Then we're going to bring in pretty much the entire North Vietnamese army, see where that's scattered, and then we'll take a look to see what it looks like for our chances for surviving these last 2.5 years of the war. All right, political cadres have appeared. The entire North Vietnamese army is in South Vietnam right now, and it's going to get real as we get into 1975. Let's take a look and see how they deployed and see what the situation looks like. So southern South Vietnam, we had, I think another political cadre appeared here. We had North Vietnamese Army Brigades 1, 2, and then 3 appear here. This is not necessarily good. I think we might try to be aggressive and try to take this one out before we get forces coming in from Quang Tri, because otherwise we could have a serious problem with a lot of brigades at once. But I don't know. I think we're gonna have to move these special forces out. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 brigades. I think we're gonna need more up here to try to take care of this, but I'm not sure. And especially if these drop down, it could get ugly fast. We might need to divert forces up here, but we desperately need them in other places too. Let's take a look at the central part. So yeah, central South Vietnam, 3, 4, 3. Hopefully these guys will just camp out and chill again for another 1.5 years like they've been doing. But I think it's more than likely we're going to see some pretty intense combat dropping down in here. We have units, but I don't know if we get unlucky and they come in force in one season, we're not going to be able to contain them all. We're going to just have to pick and choose a little bit. But I'm hopeful that we can, I mean, we might lose a police force in an area, but hopefully we can hang on and not have another province here fall. In the north, again, just playing by colors, right? Orange and red are bad for us. Yellow is good for us. Yeah, so you get the picture, right? In Da Nang, they actually had 2 more political cadres appear, but we ran all of our special operations missions here and we're able to take out 2 of them, get us back down to 4. I think that's going to be helpful because I don't want to lose this province as well. Hue had another political cadre appear. I think that's okay as long as we'll probably have to bring our special forces in here. Otherwise, this is going to fall really fast. It's at -8 right now, goes to -10. So we're going to have to do that. Hopefully these guys will hang out in the woods for a while. But Hue might fall. It could be tricky. I'm not sure. Again, I feel like we're going to have pressure in so many places, and we're just not going to be answer all of them. Quang Tri is a hopeless situation. It's completely gone. It has just reached -10 with none of our forces and North Vietnamese Army forces in here. So it will fall right away in the next season, and there's nothing that we can do to stop it. So we're going to see one of these political cadres and one of these North Vietnamese Army brigades. Each turn the situation is like this, they're going to go to the populated area of Saigon. Now, fortunately, the police force in Saigon is strong, so we'll be able to absorb these political cadres, but we want to make sure that we have enough military force there to be able to fight consistently each of the next 6 seasons, plus whatever else comes in next year against these military units here. So we have some fighting in Saigon that's going to happen because Quang Tri's fallen, and yeah, it's just not a very good situation right now. So with that, we will end here at December 1974. We will come back in our final episode and we will fight the remainder of the war. 2.5 years, so 1975, 76, and it goes halfway into 1977. To see, again, our win condition is if Saigon hasn't fallen. So even if we've got fallen provinces and Saigon's still hanging on, right, hasn't fallen yet, we would win. But it might be that type of situation where it comes down to kind of like the last couple seasons and we're desperately trying to hang on here. You know, at some point it might even make sense to, like, do we abandon all of these provinces and just say screw it and just try to fight completely in Saigon? If we know they're not going to fall, if we know how long it's going to take them to fall, right? If it's going to take 5 or 6 months to fall, 5 or 6 seasons to fall, maybe we could pull out and just say, well, it's going to fall after the war would be over. So we're good with that. But yeah, lots to think about. Not having kind of fought this part of the war before, I have kind of making this up as we go along. But we'll see you in the next episode as soon as it's ready. I will put a link here. Let me know your thoughts, ideas. Boy, there is sure a lot of red and orange in South Vietnam, and not a heck of a lot of yellow to stop them. But we'll see what we can do. See you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.